Penny Heyns, Olympic champion and chairperson of the FINA Athletes Committee. And Cameron Vandenberg, Olympic champion from South Africa. Thank you for joining me here on stage. It's always a privilege and an honor to converse with other athletes. I feel like we always understand each other's journeys and appreciate all the sweat and tears that have gone into it. To start off, will you each introduce yourselves a little bit? You guys have extensive bios, and I want to give you the opportunity to share with the audience a little bit about yourself.
What if we're shy? Penny Heyns from South Africa. I retired something like 18 years ago. So maybe my views and my perspective on how to retire would be a little bit different from Cameron. So I swam in 92, 96, 2000, 2 gold medals in Atlanta and a bronze and a couple of world records. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Penny.
My name is Cameron van Burgh. I am also, like Penny Heyns, an Olympic champion, also from South Africa. I've been fortunate enough to achieve my highest dreams in swimming, and subsequent to that, also after 2016 Olympic Games, I went on to open my own sports marketing company in South Africa, which I ended up selling in April this year, and I've now started at a private hedge fund in London, which I'm still competing. So. Yeah, looking forward to obviously racing here in Hangzhou.
Impressive. Thank you both for sharing a little bit about yourselves. For elite athletes, the large majority of their effort and energy is focused on training and a competition. As athletes come to the end of their careers, they are faced with the question, what is next? So, Penny, what has been the hardest thing after competing and transitioning into the so-called real world?
I think that it's different for every athlete, but in a sense, I was a bit of a pioneer in South Africa. I was based outside of the country for at least 8 years. So when I did retire and go home, it's a bit confusing to say exactly what the issues were, but it was a roller coaster ride probably for a period of about 10 years. I don't think most people know that. As an athlete, we know how to kind of wear the mask. But for me, it was moving back to South Africa, having the relative fame, which I wasn't used to. I was able to hide from it when I was in the States. Security issues. I think a large amount of it is trying to figure out who am I, because I don't want to be just the swimmer. And Cameron and I were talking about it. Unfortunately, people still see you as a swimmer for a very long time. So they come to you and they say, now what are you doing? And it doesn't feel like any answer you give is sufficient. And so I think it's dealing with your identity and figuring out who you are. That's probably the most important thing, I think.
Cameron, you're still competing, but it looks like, or it sounds like, you already have some ideas of what you would like to do once you stop competing. What has allowed you to have that mindset of competing and also setting yourself up for the next step? Because I know that is something that's really hard for athletes to figure out.
I believe that it's imperative for athletes to plan for the transition of their career. I see too many athletes in my lifetime where they stop and they have no plan B, what's going to happen, where they're going to go. It's difficult when you have no options. You sort of choose potentially the wrong option sometimes because it might be the only option. And what I did was, just like when you're young, you take a year or two transition from a junior athlete to a senior athlete. I've taken, since 2016 Olympic Games, I toned my training regime down, focusing more on the 50 meters, moving away from the 100 meters, to sacrifice that time to be able to give myself the opportunity to invest in the next 40 years, to see what is it that I want to do with my life, what gives me the adrenaline kick that you get from standing in front of 20, 30,000 people at Olympic Game final. Which is why I went on the traditional route originally, and I opened my own sports marketing company, thinking that the link between being an athlete, you work with sponsors, your network is very strong in the sporting field, was the right way to go. And I was very fortunate enough to have success in that industry, but it never made me happy. I felt like I was selling my soul. And I'm fortunate that I've gave myself this time because, you know, I spoke to my partner in the beginning of the year and I said that, you know, this is not what makes me happy. This is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. This is the wrong option. And subsequently then sold the company, and I studied finance. I started trading my own equity when I was a young kid, and I did an internship in about May, June in London at some of the big hedge funds and investment banks, and that kick of investing and being able to participate in this global market on such a big scale, you know, in any given day you're losing or making a couple $100 million, that gave me that rush, adrenaline rush that I had from swimming, or that I still have from swimming. And so it comes back to, I think that it's super important for people to understand that you need to be able to give yourself time to transition, to find that right option and not just choose the only option, because 9 out of 10 times that will be the wrong one.
So you talk about the time to give yourself that option. So for both, this is a question for both of you. Is there something that administrators at FINA or national federations can do to help with this transition?
I think personally that swimmers rely a lot on your coaches and your administrators. They are effectively, you know, the gatekeepers to what goes on in our lives. We trust our coaches and our administrators wholeheartedly. You know, I think a little bit of guidance from that point of and understanding exactly what I was talking about, potentially to sacrifice some of your end of the career to be able to find what you love, see what you want to do. You know, swimmers, I think, sometimes don't think that far, and I think the onus might sometimes need to be up onto the administrators and the coaches to help educate and help enforce these kind of changes, enforce that athletes realistically think about their future, realistically think about what they want to do, and actually question them. You know, I think when you just get told, you should be looking at your future. You know, it sort of goes in one ear and out the other. And there's the whole principle of, if you get shown the answer, you're never going to learn. When you actually struggle on your own and you go out there, and, you know, it could be sort of things where athletes, you know, start doing internships. You know, say administrators can help with potential sponsors that are, you know, even sitting in this room. You know, athletes can go out and start doing this type of internships in different fields of the business to see what do they like, what do they have a knack for. You know, that could really enforce that change and that mindset and pivot people into the right direction of where they should be going and where they should be working towards.
I think I like your approach because it's very practical, and those are the answers we need. However, I think there's a real area here that we're overlooking, and that is, as I touched on it already, the identity of the athlete. And I think maybe because there's still a little bit of a stigma attached to mental health, I feel that there's a gap there where athletes / coaches don't understand it. Yes, we have sports psychologists. We're all happy to go and see the sports psychologist. Maybe that's where we need to start addressing this issue, where they firstly educate the athlete as to what happens physiologically to your body when you retire, in terms of the various hormones, you know, and you're coming off of that high. So Cameron's taken 2 years and now he's addressing that because he's now got this adrenaline rush again. But for some people, it's going to take years and years before you figure out what that would be for you. And in the interim, you're sitting in this hole, this depression, and when you're in that space, you can't make the right decisions. So it's a catch-22, and I think the whole industry of sports psychiatry is becoming a little bit more acceptable. But I think we need to chip away at the stigma attached to that, and the likes of a Michael Phelps and others are doing that to a degree.
So is there a model that exists? Like, what is the perfect model from transitioning out? Or what do you want to put out there so that national federations and FINA are hearing ideas that maybe they can help implement, and we can help chip away at this stigma for our, you know, for our next generation?
Mm-hmm. I think already, if you look at the IOC, they've got the athlete career program, and I think that's a model that federations can kind of apply. And so all of that would help the athlete, but still, if we do not help them figure out who they are, and I think most athletes, obviously there's some exceptions like Cameron, and I can think of 1 or 2 others, but most athletes are going through that depression at some stage. So maybe coaches and federations need to be aware of it. I think in the professional teams in the United States, they do address this. They do prepare the athletes. They do screen on the mental side as much as the physical. And maybe that's an area where we need to start paying a bit more attention.
Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I agree with Penny. I think a big part of it is that identity loss that we do have, and it's we were discussing earlier. We were saying that it's kind of funny because you see yourself as this athlete, and you're only an athlete, and it takes such a while to be able to break free from that and understand that you're more than just an athlete. You're an actual person, and I think it comes back to potentially, when we're racing, you're always trying to prove yourself to everyone. Every year you start from nothing, you have to qualify, you get to Olympic Games, everyone is equal. You're in a lane, you have a chance. So there's this deep-rooted need to prove yourself every time, and potentially when when athletes do retire, then there is no, shall we say, setup for them to prove themselves anymore. So it almost, and they're not getting this adrenaline rush, they're not getting this approval, so that it almost boils down to this depression of, am I worth it anymore? What am I giving to society? And I think, yeah, as I said, I'm fortunate that I've taken these 2 years to be able to understand that. It has also taken me about a year to be able to understand that you are more than just an athlete. You can now be a businessman, you can be a hedge fund analyst, you can be whatever you want to be. And even speaking to Penny as well about her career and what she's done now and how she's also made the transition, it's something that is not spoken about because it's taboo, potentially. People don't want to talk about mental illness. And yeah, it's something that I do definitely agree that we can really bring out more, discuss more. Again, it's something that needs to be broken down barriers because it's difficult to start the conversation. It's a difficult conversation to have, but it's an imperative one to have.
So to the topic of identity, we hear about all athletes' successes, and I think sometimes failures give us an insight to reveal our character. Mm-hmm. So can you share with us maybe a failure or 2 that you felt has helped you along in your career to make you the champions that you were in the water and now out of the water in life?
You've only got 7 minutes. I've got lots of failures.
Okay.
No, but can I hop in here? Yeah?
Yeah, please.
So I think a turning point in my career was at the World Championships in 1994. And I had a huge failure there in the sense that I got a little bit overwhelmed in the final. I probably might have been able to medal, but ended up 6th with a really bad time. And once again, that was one of those moments where I thought it's time to retire. Until my mother spoke to me and said, you could retire, forever wonder what if, or you can choose to look at the failure and learn from it, because therein lie the nuggets of truth you need that catapults you onto tomorrow's successes. And that's exactly 2 years before Atlanta. Had the failure not happened, Atlanta wouldn't have happened. And I think it's a perspective that we need to change. Failure can teach us so much. In fact, you learn more from that than any other success, right? And I think athletes don't always recognize the skills that we've learned and that we naturally, because it just comes very naturally to those who are good, that we apply in the sport, and we fail to then carry that over and apply it in life. Simple things like the goal setting, etc. And again, learning from the failures.
Cameron?
I've had many failures as well in the pool, but I've always been fortunate enough to have that second chance of getting up and going again. The beautiful thing about swimming is that you don't always just swim one event. You have 1 or 2 events, and you can try and get back on the horse and always try and prove to yourself that that you're worth it. But I think for me, my strongest learning curve that I've had, talking about career transition, was more being in the sports marketing industry, and I think it was on my 2nd or 3rd pitch to a client. It was a very big contract that we were trying to get through, and unfortunately we did lose the contract. And in hindsight, it was one of the best things, because at the moment it felt like such a failure. It was like, okay, when's the next opportunity going to come around? And you have that sense of, am I in the right industry? Am I doing the right thing? Maybe I should stick to swimming. Like, this is not what I should be doing. And just getting back on the horse, exactly what swimming's taught me. Picking it up again, picking up the pieces, moving on to the next bit, making sure that the next one is even better, and subsequently went on to win a even better client, which was in the same category of exclusivity and an absolute pleasure to work with. So it's sort of that hindsight is perfect vision that it was actually all meant to be, but that understanding of picking yourself up, working, learning from your mistakes, and those are the strong mentality and the strong principles that swimming instills in people, and bringing back to why athletes make such good people and employees, and we have such huge potential in whatever we want to do if we are guided, if we have the right mindset, if we find that passion, that burning desire to what we want to do. I think we are unstoppable people.
I agree. And with that, I want to open it up to the audience for any questions. It's hard to see.
Cool.
No? Okay, then I'll ask another question. You mentioned some of the skills that we learn in our sports without really knowing that we're learning those skills, and then we apply them to real life. So could you name some of those skills that you feel you learn naturally by being in sports?
I think the obvious ones, but like just if you talk about mental toughness, whatever we've done in sport to get to the very top was quite natural. It's natural for us to set goals, it's natural for us to visualize, you know, the positive self-talk, all of those things. And what I realized a little while ago in working with corporates is it's exactly the same. And even if you look at the Navy SEALs, all of these techniques that are so natural to us, we need to transfer into the world of business or whatever it is we're doing. Having said that though, the athlete, again, we can't identify it, so sometimes this is where federations and others can come in, where they help us, they hear our story and they say, okay, but you know what, that's valuable to me. Because I was quite blown away when I eventually realized that some of the story I'm telling is valuable to the other people. I couldn't make that connection. So sometimes we need someone from outside with a different perspective, different experience, to look at our story and give us sort of a clue as to what was valuable in our career so that we can then apply it in life.
Cameron, is there any other skill that now that you're in the workforce, in the real world, that you're like, oh, this is what swimming has taught me all along and I never knew, that isn't your obvious?
Sure. Well, agreeing on what Penny did say, I think my most valuable skill that I have picked up is time management as well. And, you know, if I look back to even now, it's been the last 3 months living in London, I've had a lot on my plate in the sense that I had to do a lot of exams for my regulation qualification. I was working a full day, plus gymming, plus swimming. And, you know, people ask you, how do you do it? And you say, well, you only have to sleep 8 hours in a day, don't you? You have another 16 hours. And if you just manage the time correctly and smartly and actually plan ahead, you are able to achieve a lot more and get a lot more done than what people lead on and what people think that you can do. And that comes back, I think, to swimming, where everything is sort of managed. You have training from whether it be 5:30 till 7:30, you have gym from X till X, you have to rest, you have to eat, you have got training in the afternoon. So being able to plan out your day and segments what you need to do, and even down to your weekly planning of which days are more intense than others, has also enabled me and helped me to be able to take a lot more on my plate, applying that same principle of being more intense on certain days, on different aspects, on different parts of my life. And then looking at the whole picture and how do they all link in, how does the puzzle fit, that it's not a spaghetti bolognese and it's actually a, you know, beautiful Picasso.
And in closing, what words of advice would you give to current athletes thinking of retiring?
Enjoy your swimming while you can. We're always in a hurry to retire, and then you get into real life, and life's not so black and white. But I think, as we've said, just start taking the time, as Cameron said, to not only prepare in the very practical way, but maybe start to understand what's going to actually happen to you physiologically when you retire. And maybe there's a better way to manage it than those of us in the past.
Yeah, pretty much the same. As the saying goes, you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. And just plan ahead, look where you want to go, and visualize yourself not 2 months down the road, but visualize yourself 4, 5, 6 years down the road. Where do you want to be? But that starts today.
Thank you so much for your time. and for sharing your thoughts, and for really talking about some taboo subjects that we need to start talking about in order for all our future athletes to be able to make that transition successfully and without so many hurdles. So thank you.
Sure.